Hi, I'm Emily Balcetis. I'm an associate professor of psychology at New York University and author of Clearer, Closer, Better: How Successful People See the World. I'm a behavioral scientist who investigates those things that stand in our way of success and offer evidence-based solutions to overcome those obstacles that increase the odds of meeting your goals. Today, I'm going to talk about contracting time and distance to help you move 23% faster and experience 17% less pain. I'm going to talk about increasing team members' interest in committing to a goal that they aren't even necessarily interested in themselves. And we'll talk about the power of foreshadowing obstacles to hit your own outcomes.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of Leadership Excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives. Hey, would you do me a quick favor? Send me a note, DM me on one of the big social media outlets, and tell me what platform you listen to us on. Is it Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or whatever app it is for you? Let us know. Tell me one of your favorite episodes, and I'm going to pick a winner and give you a prize that's valued at about $1,500. All right, let me ask you, what do you need to do to up-level your leadership? Well, if you're a leader, you no doubt are setting goals and probably achieving them. That's why you're in the leadership position. Are you keeping your eye on the competition? Moreover, is that the right place to be focused? Is there a way to see the outcome you want clearer, closer, and better? That's where we're going on today's next 2 episodes, so stay tuned. I'm your host, Dov Baron. I'm here to assist you tapping into the one thing in your business that changes everything by transforming meaning into action. Curious to know more? Simply go to dovbaron.com. Go to dovbaron.com. This episode of Leadership and Loyalty is brought to you in part by our other podcast, Curiosity Bites. Curiosity Bites is the answer to the question, how can we bring people together who completely disagree? It's exactly what your heart, your soul, your mind has been craving. It's your chance to sit in on some real and deeply meaning conversations with some of the world's most interesting people. Simply go to dovbaron.com. Find out how you can sign up for and sink your teeth into the delicious Curiosity Bites. As always, you can find us, both of those shows actually, on any of the podcast platforms. And we always need your help in staying relevant. So please get over there. Do us a favor, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. We really appreciate it. If you are a regular listener, big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners. We're honored and grateful to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. You can also listen to us, as I said, on Google Home or Alexa by simply saying, play Dov Baron podcast. All right. I want to thank you for sharing the show with everybody, but now we're going to dive into it. Where are you looking to go? I mean, really think about that. Where are you looking to go? I mean that quite literally. What are you looking to achieve? What might you be working really hard for a long time to get to your outcomes? And sometimes it might seem like other people getting there way faster than you, like they know something you don't. Well, what if there was a way for you to get to your destination 23% faster while having 17% less pain about getting there? Yep, that's where we're going. My guest today is Emily. Let me just back up on that. Our guest today is a New York University professor. Our guest today is Emily Balcetis. I almost made a balls of that, but we'll try it again. My guest today is Emily Balcetis. She is the author of a best-selling book, Clearer, Closer, Better: How Successful People See the World. Emily is a 2-time TED speaker whose videos have been watched millions of times. She is a professor, as I said, of behavioral science at New York University, and she's the director of the New York University Social Perception Action and Motivation Research Lab, leading an international team of scholars, writers, artists, and advocates to understand how to best direct people's efforts to meet their goals. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and help me to welcome the person who's showing us how to scientifically keep your eye on the prize, Emily Balcetis!
Thank you very much for that clearly warm welcome.
Indeed. I am looking forward to the conversation. It's a while since you and I last spoke, and many things have gone on in the world, including the fact that you are about to add to your family. So we thank you for being here in the last chunk of your pregnancy, and we really do appreciate that and giving that time. So in the context of leadership development, I like to start the show by asking, what's the most frustrating thing that you see that seems maybe glaring to you, glaringly obvious, but is often ignored or dismissed by others?
Yeah, the thing, that keeps coming back to my mind is that, when I read people's advice, or I hear from consultants that are working with us, or that are offering their perspective in this space, it often comes across as like, if you follow this formula, then you will increase the odds of success, productivity, your net income. It seems like there's, this philosophy of like a one size fits all, follow this simple, clear path, and I assure you that success will come. But as a human behavioral scientist, I know that that's not true. We are unique individuals. Our circumstances change, our goals change, and we need to be more nimble than that kind of strategy might suggest. So the thing that's been sort of irking me lately is coming across these sorts of, suggested best practices. Here's, follow these 3 simple steps, and I assure you success will come. Because that just doesn't reflect the way that humans actually work.
Thank you for that. I think that's really important. I wrote an article that said agile is the new certainty, right?
Exactly.
But what you're saying is actually even more powerful, which is it's beyond agile, because we think about agility as being sort of at a maybe even a corporate or a collective level, but nimble is actually a very personal, subjective level. It's like, you will have to adjust, not just the organization, not just the management team, but you. How are you going to be nimble? And we all, this is better than I do. Like, we love certainty. We psychologically, we want to find things that are very certain, and we can follow this path, and then we'll get to the outcome, but it isn't how it works. And so I really appreciate you bringing that up and saying, okay, I talked about this years ago. I said, why best practices are terrible, because they were best practices yesterday. It's that simple, right?
Exactly.
So
the metaphor that I like using is considering building out your toolbox. And that's what we should keep in mind as we're gathering people's suggestions for best practices, or we're learning about the latest evidence that says X or Y is going to help. We need to collect all of those examples, or to compile an extensive and diverse toolbox. You can't build a house if all you have is a hammer, right? Or you can't build a house if all you have are 20 hammers, right? We need all different sorts of tools, and we need to know how to use them and when to use them. So to me, that's a metaphor that resonates better of having this assorted collection of strategies and tactics, and knowing when are they going to be more effective and when are they not. And so at the individual level, that nimbleness that we're talking about is feeling free and empowered and knowledgeable enough to know when do you need to switch out the hammer for a screwdriver instead.
However, as not a pushback from me, but a pushback societally, we also live in this, for me, it's bloody frustrating, this niche mentality where everybody is a niche, and therefore I'm only going to come to you with this solution because this is my niche, as opposed to being a polymath, which is what is required from leadership these days, and saying this is the best practice in this context, but not in that context. So I've talked about this for years. I think that context is the real king, not content, but context. Am I willing to appraise this situation? And that's when, you come into what you're saying about the right tool at the right time, because the right tool is the right tool, but it's the wrong tool at the wrong time.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. Being able to assess that situation. What are the circumstances I find myself in, or where am I at personally in the course of making progress on this goal, and recognizing that there might be something different that I need to do for where I'm at, or there's something different that I need to do given the resources that are available, or what the team is capable of that I'm working with right now. So putting yourself inside of that broader perspective, and that's going to help you dictate, again, which tool might be best right now.
Yeah. Now, so I just talked about this whole idea of niche, and for me, I think that's one of the things that gets in the way. But I think there's another thing that gets in the way, and I know you've done some really interesting work on this in my research, and that is, I believe that one of the great downfalls of our society is already in progress and may have cascading effects, is the how driven we've become around being an instant gratification society. And your work has been able to get young people to make a shift and move out of that, because everything in society, social media, etc., is all about instant gratification. Get the like, get the dopamine here. Mm-hmm. Not, put this up. You might not get a like on it for a year, and then after a year, you might get a whole cascade of great stuff. No, I need the look. I need the like now. I need the 1,000 hits now. Right. So tell us about your work and how you've been able to get young people to make a shift.
Right. I mean, one of the problems with that want for instant gratification is that it puts us into the wrong motivational mindset. If we are a leader, if we are a manager or a supervisor, we have a team that we're leading, and we have that expectation that, every input should instantly produce some lucrative output, then what we're doing is trying to hire the next star, the next person who's capable of producing that instant gratification. We make people risk averse because they don't want to do something that may not produce that instant reward. Instead, they take the sure bet that's going to produce maybe a smaller but guaranteed outcome that is positively appraised and looked upon favorably by leadership. So having that want and creating a culture where we expect instant productivity or lucrative outcomes actually does a disservice to innovation, to productivity, to the growth of our individual team members, and to finding what people are capable of, ourselves included. So that's one of the dangers of having that be our focus, right? I mean, it's basically counterproductive to everything that would make a business a success. So what are we supposed to do about that?
Yeah,
then?
exactly.
As a leader, there are opportunities to shift that mindset within an organizational culture. And we can start by modeling that ourselves as leaders. One of the simple tactics that was suggested to me when I brought in a consultant to work with me and my team was ask this question, maybe once a week or however often you have a check-in with some, team players or some of the, project directors that are reporting to you. How can I better support you today or this week than I did last week? It's a simple question, but there's so much psychology that goes into that. First of all, you are acknowledging that maybe I didn't do so great this week in offering you the support that you need to get your job done. So it communicates a humility, and that there is, it's accepted, it's okay, that there may be room for improvement. I'm telling you that I think that maybe there's room for me to improve to support you. And it also opens up the conversation for saying like, last week was a little bit tough because of this reason. And so moving forward, I think with this resource or with this kind of support, I could do better. So it just puts the conversation not on show me what you did. All right. And let's see if that was good enough. But instead of considering what resources were offered and what's capable, what's possible, and that the expectation is not success at every evaluative point in project check-ins.
Yeah, I think in all the work I've done in over the years, and everybody who's ever gotten stuck in something, instant gratification is in there somewhere around something. But you did this work specifically with young people, and I really found that fascinating because, as I said, they are the conditioned the most highly around instant gratification. By the way, let me be clear in that my parents thought that about me too. So I'm not making any, I'm not making a generalization about this generation, but it is definitely pushed more because of social media, etc. And you did this around money, and I thought it was really interesting, money and saving and all the rest of it. So I just want people to have an understanding of what happened and how you got them to do that.
Right. So this was a study that I did based off of work conducted by behavioral scientist Hal Hershfeld, who's a professor at UCLA. And so what we did in this experiment, I was working with about 60, 20-year-olds, 20, 25-year-olds. They were all on the brink of graduating from New York University. They all had jobs to help pay their living expenses and whatnot. So all of them were employed. And I asked them, are you currently saving for retirement? What do you think the answer was? No. 100% no. And I wouldn't blame them either. When I was 22 years old, I was not putting aside any of this. It wasn't even salary, but hourly wages that I was getting for retirement. So that's not a surprise. But when I asked them why, of course, they had a lot of different answers and rationalizations for why they weren't. But the most commonly offered one was like, retirement just seems so far away.
Yes.
Right. And so that, to me, of course, the answers were varied, but that one coming up the most frequently reminded me of some other work that I had done. And that the problem might be that the choices we're making today, for instance, taking 10% of our hourly wages and putting them aside for something that will benefit us in 40 years, just doesn't seem relevant. Like the benefits and the costs are just, incommensurate with one another. But of course, all analysts tell us that if we were to put aside just a small amount early on in our career, we're going to reap tremendous benefits later on. That, because of the way compound interest works, of course, that smaller sooner is much better than bigger later. We just can't really catch up when we start too late in life. And so that's, to me, their answer was really the psychological place where we could try to intervene to produce more of a connection between that far off distant future that's going to reap these rewards and the choice and the sacrifice that I have to make today, and then persistently over time to reap those greater benefits. So the cute thing that we did based off of Hal Hershfeld's research is that I took a picture of their face. I used some photo morphing software and blended their likeness with Dan Rather, other news reporters, Maya Angelou, Betty White, famous, successful, older people, so that we could create that visual in 20-year-olds' minds of what that far off distant future might look like, literally what they might look like, and take some time to think about what's your life going to be like. Now, what that's doing is contracting that distance. Now, my 65-year-old self doesn't seem so foreign, doesn't seem so abstract or like out in the ether. I can see it. I can envision it. It produces a more psychological closeness, we would say.
Yep.
And after having gone through that experience of seeing themselves with more wrinkles and white hair, after getting over the initial shock, I asked them again, like, now, what do you think? What do you think about saving for retirement? Is that something that you think you could do, that you should do? What are your thoughts on that? Almost all of them now, 55 out of 60 of them said, yeah, I think that I should. I think that I can, and I think that I will. And the reason why was because it seemed more relevant, right? They understood, like, it's not a stranger who's going to get this benefit. It's me. And I get a little bit more this connection between today's current choice and the outcome that I'll experience in a couple decades' time.
You just said something that is really, really fascinating to me, is that our future self is a stranger. right? And I think that is right there is an underline for everybody to get, that your future self is a stranger. How can you make them a friend? How can you make them familiar to you, not some in the distance? And by doing that, you suddenly are like, oh, hold on a second, this is really me. This is where I'm going. And I think it's a simple but powerful experiment, because I mean, we can look at this in all kinds of levels. We can look at this at climate change. I am old enough that I can remember discussions of climate change in my late 20s, right? I can clearly remember that. And that was a couple of years ago. You know what I mean? Oh, that was a while ago, right? And and still people are going, no, there's no climate change. I had to just talk to somebody yesterday who was like, yeah, well, but I said, no, hold on a second. I don't care why you believe there's climate change. That's a different discussion. So you think it's man-made, you don't think it's man-made. That's irrelevant to me. What's relevant is the climate is changing, right? You cannot argue with that. But the reality of it is it doesn't affect me, so I don't get it. It's somewhere off in the future. And what you've done is you've made it familiar. And this is what's so important. I want to ask you, was there a specific reason you used famous people? So you used a Dan Rather or Maya Angelou or Betty White or whoever it might be. Is there a reason you chose psychologically to use those people?
Well, in a sense, yes, that they are also people who have that are favorable, that we like, that have been successful. And so if you see a little bit of Maya Angelou in yourself, it's not going to be as, I mean, of course, it's off-putting to see yourself with wrinkles and white hair when you're in your 20s. It's shocking. But it's tinged with favorability. These are successful people. And so we probably stacked the deck, if we had aged them to look like their life would be awful, that life really took a toll on them, we may not have found the same effects. That's certainly possible. But it was also just more fun for me to be able to see, what does a little bit of Dan Rather and this man look like now?
Well, just for me, it's interesting because of my psychology background.
Yeah.
Because I think that the interesting thing about it is, I wonder if you did that experiment again without famous people, would it be more motivating or less motivating? Because if I'm going to be Dan Rather or I'm going to be Betty White, I don't need to worry about money. If I'm going to be old, wrinkly, and an unknown face, holy shit, I really better save. I wonder if it's a difference. Right? That's a discussion between two psychology people.
Right. I mean, you've touched upon a really good point, is like, what is the formula for motivation? Where does motivation come from to make change and to commit to something today that you have to sustain for a long period of time? It in part comes from recognizing a discrepancy between where I am and where I want to be. And if we don't notice that discrepancy between current and ideal, then motivation stays pretty low. So you're right that having successful older people be sort of funneled into that representation of what my older future self is going to look like is probably part key for making these results happen, is that like, oh, well, that looks like a pretty desirable way to age. And so now I'm motivated to do something to make sure that happens.
And again, that would very much depend on the individual, whether they are away from or towards person. So if they're away from, and you show them a person who's somebody they don't want to look like, they go, oh, okay, I better save. If they're towards and you show them a Dan Rather or a Betty White, they're like, oh, that's going to be me, then I'll do it. Yeah. It's really fascinating for me, the work that you've done around that, because what you're doing is this distinction, or this way of, as you said, contracting time, this way of pulling in time. And that is in many ways sort of formulaic in your work around clearer, closer, better. So walk us through a little bit of that, because in part two, I want to get into the structure of that and how each of us can do that. But let's just sort of have an understanding of it first.
Yeah, sure. So the idea of the book, Clearer, Closer, Better, How Successful People See the World, is that there is great power in our eyes. This is an untapped superpower, I guess, if you will, for how to continually motivate ourselves, to keep ourselves accountable, and to find more opportunities in the world. That we are confident that we see the world the way that it really is. But if we sort of shake up that assumption, we realize that we can do more with what we're looking at, how we structure our environments, what we focus on, and what we put into the peripheral vision. And we might find different outcomes if we engage in that sort of looking intentionally rather than haphazardly. So it's just, again, an additional tool that we can add to our toolbox to help us overcome obstacles that we might face when we're trying to set and hold ourselves accountable to different goals that we hold.
Well, in part two, we want to look at how to do that. And what you found out from that with athletes and people who are hugely successful, and how we as individuals and as leaders of organizations can also use this very powerful and in many ways simple, it's not complex tool in all of our lives, and we can use it to teach our children as well as teach the people we're leading. Emily, before we go to part two, I want to make sure that people know how they can find out more about you, about what it is that you do, and how to maybe the book and all of the resources that you offer. Would you please tell people how they can find out more about you?
Sure. You can find me on LinkedIn. I post all of the content, any resources I have on LinkedIn. I write for Psychology Today as a blog that also freely distributes the science that we have learned as it relates to social issues that we're dealing with. And of course, you can find the book wherever books are sold.
Fabulous. So again, we're going to make sure that all of those links are, of course, posted in the show notes. So you'll be able to reach out to Emily through LinkedIn. You'll be able to find a book. We'll make sure all that's there for you. But until then, stay tuned and stay curious, because we're going to be back in just one click with Emily Balcetis, who is the author of Clearer, Closer, Better. And we'll show you how to bring all of that into your grasp. Stay tuned and stay curious. See you in one click.